For the second year in a row, Biden has decided not to take part in a pre-Super Bowl interview. This is crazy for a variety of reasons. The Super Bowl is the most watched event in all of America. I actually went back and checked, Krystal. Out of the 100 top broadcasts of 2023, 94 were football related.
Really?
The only thing this country still watches, the only thing that we're all tied together is football.
I
don't even watch
there would
football.
be 94 football, but I guess every week,
well,
whatever.
Different markets, games, etc. People in the comments can tell me all about their wars with their regional broadcasters. I fail to understand how exactly you're supposed to watch football in this country across 5 channels, streaming services, etc. The point is that everybody watches the Super Bowl. Pretty much. The vast majority of Americans will engage with the Super Bowl in some way or the other, either online or actually watching the event live. The pre-Super Bowl interview is a hallmark tradition of the American presidency. They don't do it for kicks. They do it because it's the easiest way to reach the vast majority of people when they're getting ready for the game. The second year in a row now, deciding not to take part in the interview. And this is not going to be a very tough interview. It's like with a friendly news organization too. And yet the explanation that they give is totally ridiculous when they're belying the fact that he's afraid that he's old and that it's going to come across the more that people see him, the less they're going to vote for him. Here was their excuse, the Biden campaign, to CNN when asked about this.
Just gotten this news from CBS that the White House has turned down a request for the president to participate in that traditional interview before the Super Bowl. So I don't have to tell you, this is the night where I think more Americans tune in than any other night of the year. It is the most popular programming of the year. So why was that decision made?
Well, yeah, I'll certainly be tuning into the game, but I don't know about you. During pregame, I'm usually still making my chili or putting my beer in the cooler. So I don't know how many eyeballs we're going to lose during pregame coverage. This campaign is definitely going to do everything it needs to do to reach the voters who are going to decide this election. That's why we're running an ad during the Grammys tomorrow night, for example.
Yeah, but running an ad during the Grammys, I mean, that costs you something. This is free advertising, if you will. This is millions and millions, tens of millions of eyeballs. So why would the president not want to do that? It seems like an easy decision.
Again, the president's going to continue to campaign and continue to hold interviews across the country from now through November. Not too concerned about pregame coverage right now.
Okay, so their reasoning is, well, we buy ads during the Grammys. So in 2023, 12.5 million people watched the Grammys. Now, I want to meet these people and be like, what's wrong with you? But that's a second story. 115 million people watched the Super Bowl in 2023.
Yeah.
So 10 times the number of people watch the Super Bowl as opposed to watch the Grammys. And yet they're like, well, we bought ads at the Grammy. What are these people doing? Unless the less that we see of Biden, the more that we see of something else that may cause you to vote against Trump is their best strategy. Now, I do want to be honest. I think this is probably their best strategy. The more that people see of Biden, it's terrible. I mean, people are like, wow, this man is so old. I literally cannot believe he's the president. He also is very reluctant. He's given less interviews than any prior president in modern American history, press conferences as well. Why? Because he talks out of turn, and he's probably going to get asked an uncomfortable question or two, even in a friendly interview, Krystal, about Israel. And what's he going to say? I don't know. He doesn't know. He barely even knows what he's going to say about Israel, about the border, about all these issues where he's dramatically, underwater with the American people. Not to mention he could have, some flub in terms of his age. So this is a real problem for him. I mean, I just think it's an immense sign of weakness to not take part in this interview. And it's undemocratic, in terms of not wanting to show yourself. But B, it does show you how that this is their only chance that people come out to vote against Trump. Yeah. It may work, too. That's the crazy part.
I think you're right that if I was his campaign aide, if I was dedicating my life to getting Joe Biden reelected, this is probably a choice I would make as well.
Same.
Because of two reasons. Number one, it's painful to listen to him. Every sentence is like torturous and it's like uncomfortable because you are wondering at all times if he's going to be able to stick the landing or if his brain is just going to like melt in front of your eyes. So there's that. And then there's also the fact every time he does open his mouth, he's like a little bit too honest. Like when he got asked about our strikes on the Houthis, like, hey, is this working? He's like, is it working? No. Is it going to continue? Yes. So I think there's also a fear of him, of the old man being a little bit too accidentally honest in the insanity that is our foreign policy and many other policies besides at this point. And that's not the only time when he, as you put it, Saagar, has spoken on a turn and gotten himself into hot water. I mean, how many times have there been comments about China and Taiwan that were all over the map that caused all kinds of diplomatic issues as well? So they're like, you know what? Best thing we can do is keep this man under wraps, record some ads where we have 100% control over what the messaging is and how he appears and what we're doing here. And then, you know, just like hope and pray that Trump is enough to keep people in line once again, one more time. Lynn, let's hope that those midterm results, let's hope that those special election results carry over for Joe Biden as well.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's not a bad strategy. At the same time, in terms of bleeding young voters, let's put this up there. This is a hilarious little tidbit that we can show you. He says, the White House, in a reflection of their public confidence regarding the politics of Biden on Israel, has arranged a call with Senator John Fetterman. Fetterman has delighted in trolling left-wing critics by resolutely standing with Israel since October 7th, telling me young voters should consider the implications of enabling a candidate who had likely given Netanyahu even more of a free hand. So I guess, what is it? The Fetterman justification is, well, but Trump. Which, I mean, maybe he's right, but we don't have necessarily the counterfactual because Trump is not currently the president in terms of how he's handling this, and actually has been very quiet in terms of what he actually thinks about Israel and Gaza, which, again, I always sense from that man. He has timing. He knows exactly what's popular, what's not, what to speak out on, other than when it concerns actually himself and his legal problems. But he seems to think that Fetterman can bail him out or give him some advice with young voters, which is especially ironic, Krystal, because if we go and we pull the crosstab polling, not just on Israel, but with Fetterman himself, Fetterman has had an increase in popularity in Pennsylvania. You want to guess with whom? Boomers! All right? Boomers
probably
are loving, boomers and wine mobs. They're loving John Fetterman. They like his shtick. Actual young people, no, they're not very pro John Fetterman at all.
Yeah.
You know, he's no longer pothead Fetterman and talking about dress code and all that. The Israel stuff and, you know, basically being a hardcore Biden stan has definitely won him, you know, points with the MSNBC faithful, but that's not young people.
Well, and even the MSNBC faithful, they're in favor of a ceasefire and they're overwhelmingly opposed to Biden's policy on Israel as well. So if you're, I don't know what you're going to John Fetterman for. I mean, I guess it's maybe you can commiserate about both of you having trouble completing a sentence or formulating a thought, as evidenced by, put this up on the screen, a reporter at The Intercept, Prem Takar, he interviewed John Fetterman about his support for suspending aid to UNRWA at a time when, you know, Gazans are literally starving to death while allegations against 0.04% of its staff are investigated versus his opposition in doing the same for Israeli forces who the ICJ and a U.S. court both say are plausibly committing a genocide. Here is what he said, quote, well, again, it's not. We need a full investigation and find out just how much a part of it was about that and how much, you know, the old question, how much they knew and when they knew that. The Intercept. So you're saying that for Israel as well? Fetterman. Yeah, okay, so good. All right, well, good.
What?
That's the man that you're going to for advice on Israel and appealing to young people.
Mean?
And I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means. But there you go. That's the man that they're seeking advice from. Him and Morning Joe, apparently, Saagar.
Yes, that's right. Morning Joe. But we can't forget, actually, our own James Lee, who does partner content for us. He's done some fantastic segments. He was on the ground in Nevada, and he decided to go and interview some people who decided that they weren't going to vote for Joe Biden. So let's hear from them in their own words.
Do you think Joe Biden has done a good job in the last 3 or 4 years?
Terrible, in my opinion. I'm sorry, but he did a terrible job. I have a daughter that's just retired from the military. You know what I'm saying?
Biden versus Trump, do you have any thoughts there?
Neither one.
Neither one. Because I know Nevada is a swing state, kind of. It's definitely not a shoo-in like California. So even with those conditions, you would still say maybe if it comes down to it, Trump versus Biden, you would still sit it out.
I would have to sit it out with Trump versus Biden.
I thought that was interesting, you know, in terms of not only in terms of him saying it would sit it out, but when he said, I also noted what he said there, Krystal, where he said, my daughter just retired from the military. And, you know, these are people who are watching. We have 3 American service members who were just killed. And, you know, it's one of those where if you have a family member or any others who is in service, especially if they're deployed to the Middle East, you're rightfully asking very legit questions. They're also also, just to highlight Biden's strategy here, this is something I've been thinking about a lot, where how cursed we are as Americans to have 2 successive presidents obsessed with cable news. And it's funny, too, because Biden was somebody who would make fun of Trump for his obsession with Fox News and Fox and Friends and all that. But it turns out he's just the liberal side of the coin. Let's put this up there on the screen. Biden is, quote, obsessed with Morning Joe. They say that the White House aides appear on MSNBC's Morning Joe. They're often booked between 7 and 7:40 because they want to reach who? President Biden. I remember when people would make fun of Trump aides for doing this. They say Biden's years-long love of MSNBC's staple morning show affects how the White House runs and who Biden listens to. The president often calls Joe Scarborough, who is now a harsh critic of Donald Trump, to get Scarborough's take on issues and sometimes vent about media coverage. During the day, he has often asked his staff whether they saw a story, a poll, or a segment that has been on the show. He includes show regulars in regular off-the-record conversations with experts. And Biden pays particular attention to morning listeners, or morning time regulars such as Mike Barnacle, foreign policy expert Richard Haas, and historian John Meacham, who has assisted on several Biden speeches. I mean, this is beyond parody. It is literally the inverse to the Fox and Friends madness that happened. And yet, by the way, courage to Alex Thompson at Axios for actually writing this story, because it does show you really who Biden is. Biden is a dyed-in-the-wool, normie, MSNBC lib. And it's like, to understand that is to understand so many of his proclivities, his understanding of American politics, and so much more. And it also just shows us that the rotting husk of cable still has so much power in this country because the right people watch it. They're obsessed with what these dwindling idiots say on cable television. It's just stunning to me.
Well, and if you were going to pick one show on MSNBC, which would be like the worst show possible to get advice from, because there are different flavors of liberalism, of, Democratic Party obsession liberalism within the MSNBC banner. Morning Joe is the one that's like decorum above all, resistance to Trump above any other particular policy decision. It's the most conventional wisdom of conventional wisdom. And so the fact that Joe Biden is relying for his reelection on the advice primarily of Joe Scarborough and John Fetterman, it actually makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, totally.
When you look at the decision making and what is unfolding before us and how they are in a horrific position in terms of actually winning re-election. But you're so right. I mean, even down to, it has so many echoes of Trump, even down to, the aides trying to get booked in the right time slot to get a message to Biden that he apparently won't receive face-to-face. He'll only pay attention to it when it's being broadcast on Morning Joe. I mean, that's identical with Trump.
Just like Trump.
How his aides and his advisors and people wanted to influence him, they would do the exact same thing. They would try to communicate with him via Fox News and Fox and Friends versus in person, because he would take that more seriously. It is a sad, pathetic, degraded, decaying political system that we have here, that they are paying attention at all to what any of these blathering idiots have to say.
I just don't get it. And especially because, can you read the news? Can you look at numbers? I just read a New York Times article 3 days ago. I just pulled it up here. Quote, more people are watching the Hallmark Channel than CNN. The world needs love, and Hallmark is cashing in. Hallmark, by the way, is having a resurgence because they find themselves in the top 10 of overall cable news channels. That's the type of stuff that people are watching on cable. You're losing to the Hallmark Channel. We're talking about CNN, and yet the amount of power they still, remain and they have in this country, it's just stunning. Look, we could talk about it all day long. We can hope for a future, but when you've got a bunch of boomers, and Biden's not even a boomer. He's like silent generation. Who have grown up with this and the power that they have. I like to think that even if I grew up in the podcast era or whatever, let's say, and I was running for office, let's say TikTok, which I'm not on, is as popular, even more popular in the future. Obviously, you pay attention to TikTok. I'd be like, okay, what are people watching? I'm old, this is the medium I prefer, but these guys are so locked in to their medium. I just look, it's a different reality that they're living in. That's very key to understand. Very, very key.
It is truly a different reality and a complete bubble that they have sealed themselves into.
Absolutely.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscribing subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.